you're thinking of moving to the DMV, but you don't really know if it's going to be for you. Well, you're in the right spot, because in this video, we're going to talk about the pros and the cons of living in DC, and we're going to get into that right now. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Brittany Stinney, a realtor probably serving the DMV, and I can't wait to talk to you about DC because it's just a beautiful city. We all love DC. Well, if you don't love DC, I'm going to make you a lover of DC today, but we're going to talk about things that you want to think about because as with any area, there's a lot of great features and then there's some others that might not be for you. So we're going to get into that right now. And before we do, make sure you turn on your notifications and hit that subscribe button so that way you don't miss out on any videos where we're talking about all things DC, Maryland, and Virginia, okay? You don't want to miss out on these juicy details, but let's get into it. Let's get into the first pro of living in DC. So that is job opportunities. Now, there are so many different things you can get into. You can work in the school system, you can work in the public schools, you can work in the colleges and the universities in this area. You can get into the art industry out here. I don't know it that well, but I know it exists. If you want to get into like the food restaurant tour, I believe that's the word, you want to get into that, there's a lot of opportunities for that. There's so many diverse restaurants here, so it's like the perfect palette if you want to introduce something new. And then of course you can get into like politics, international law, government, all those things. That is all here in DC. And that's just to even just give you a taste of it, right? Like, because there's just so many different things you could do here. But the good thing is, in addition to the wealth of opportunities, is that the average salary here is actually higher than what you're going to see elsewhere. So that could position you nicely. Now, number two for our pros is actually the rich history and culture in DC. Look, y'all, like for real, every second of the day, there's something to do here in DC. There's something to be seen. There's some activity, from the Cherry Blossom Festival to all the different parades like the 8th Street Festival, which I personally love. Like, there are just events and activities, and there's just culture and history here. You have, of course, the Smithsonian museums, that there's a good amount of those. So you can go to the Air and Space Museum or the African American History Museum. There are so many different options in terms of things to get into that just teach you more about the world and the diversity that we have here, right? And you can pick that all up here. And even if you don't want to go to a venue, you can just go walk on the National Mall and just see the diversity that the city has to offer. And you have some people playing soccer, some people at the food truck, some people flying a kite, like so many things. And you can even go like kayaking not too far from there, or running and jogging and all those things. So you have a lot of just variety here in DC. All right, so you heard me talking about walking, and that actually leads to pro number 3, which is our walkability and transportation. So DC is very accessible. You have the metro running through the city, and then DC itself is just walkable. You can easily come out of your home, walk down the street, be at a restaurant or a little mom and pop shop or a mom and pop restaurant or a grocery store. So it makes it really nice because you can easily get in and out of the city, which is helpful, so you don't have to need a car all the time. Okay, point number 4, or pro number 4, which I already kind of talked about a little bit, it's just the diverse food and entertainment. If you eat at a chain restaurant in DC, you are not living DC life. There is so much to try here, y'all. The food is great. I actually think Baltimore food is a little bit better, but we'll talk about that on another video. But DC still has a ton of options. You can go from seafood to Asian to just every cultural experience your taste buds can think of. You can find it here in DC. So you have not only restaurants, but you also have nightlife, right? You have various clubs, different activities. Back in my day, when I actually went out before 9 p.m., or excuse me, after 9 p.m., it was always to DC. I've lived in DC once. I mainly live in Maryland now, but even when I lived in Maryland, I would travel into DC in my younger days at night, because that's where you want to be, is in DC, if you want to get out and enjoy that nightlife. So if that's important to you, DC is where it's at. All right, so that leads us to our last pro that we're going to discuss, and that is the outdoor space and just that green space of DC. Now, you might not think about that when you think of DC, because there are so many buildings and different structures throughout the city, but let's just start with Rock Creek Park, which is like massive in itself, and it actually, goes into Maryland. But Rock Creek Park is a great space where you can go hike, you can run, you can do all the things, and they're just trails all throughout the city. It's a vibe here in DC. It's a vibe. So now that we've talked about the good parts of DC, let's get into the parts you might want to consider, otherwise known as the cons. But, let's talk about it. So the first con, right? The first negative aspect of DC is the high living costs. because everything that I just described is beautiful, right? It's why everybody wants to be here, but it's also why those price points go up. In the city, you can get condos in like the $500,000 range, 600,000. You do still have single family homes here as well. Those can be in the 5 range. I've seen some in the 5s as well as the 6s, and it just depends on where you're located in DC, but you can easily go from 500,000 to even over $1 million. Okay, con number 2, y'all, and this is probably my least favorite part about DC. That is travel time, meaning traffic, parking, all the things. When I first moved to DC years ago, I struggled the most with parking because I didn't understand when I went to the grocery store, why did I have to pay to park? Now, that is not every grocery store, but there are some you got to pay to park. I still don't get it. But parking can be a beast. Let's say you want to go out with friends for the night and you're circling for like 30 minutes just looking for parking. So keep that in mind. Now, I will say, even though parking is annoying, they do have a great system called Park Mobile, which is in most spots of the city. I love that because you can just easily do it on your phone. To me, it's like the easiest way to pay for parking like anywhere. So you have that option. But you also have the metros, which we talked about, but those can get very congested. So those are things you want to think about because it can get, that traffic gets intense, especially around rush hour. Ugh, not for me. All right, now this third con might not be a con depending on where you're coming from, but that can be the weather. It can be a little bit of an extreme. We can get hot and humid out here. If you're coming from Texas, it probably won't be that bad. If you're coming from like Arizona, it's gonna be bad because we're not as hot as Arizona, but we are humid. And then winters, it can be hit or miss. Some seasons we get a good amount of snow, some we don't see any, and it just depends. So again, that might be great for you. I lived in Alaska for 3 years, and compared to Alaska, these winters are nothing, but something to think about. All right, y'all, so con number 5, I feel like it's a little touchy, and I thought about not even mentioning it, but it's worth discussing, right? That is that of income disparity and gentrification. In DC, we have a range. We have a range of price points. We have a range of price brackets. And so that can be a little disheartening sometimes in what we see. And sometimes we see, the gentrification process where individuals who have lived there for a long time no longer can afford to live there for a long time, and now they're forced out. That is a whole video in itself. But I will add, even though we're talking about our cons, there are builders who are working and community members who are working to make more affordable housing for everybody so that people who are DC natives and love DC and want to stay DC natives can do so. So we're going to focus on the positive, even though we're talking about the negative. What are your thoughts on that, though? So the question is DC for you? And that's something you want to think about. Think about the pros and cons that we've discussed. There's so many things that DC has to offer. And then there's also some challenges right here in the city, as with anywhere, but you want to think about if it's the right place for you. Now, if you still feel like you don't know enough about DC and you want to find out more, make sure you subscribe to my channel. That way, when I drop more videos about DC, you are in the loop. And also feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer questions if you're trying to figure out if what part of DC works well for you, or where should you be, or how can you live like near DC but not in DC, right? And I even have a video on that if you want to check that out, where I talk about Southern Maryland, which is going to put you in close proximity to DC. So check that out. Now, I promised you I was going to share some inside tips if you're considering moving to DC, and let's get into it real quick. One, you want to think about, are you okay living in the suburbs? If you want to be near DC, but kind of out of DC, you might want to look at Arlington or Alexandria, Virginia, or even like Oxon Hill, Maryland, Fort Washington, Maryland, National Harbor, those areas kind of outside, or even Tacoma Park, Silver Spring. Like there's a good amount of cities surrounding DC that will give you the suburbs, but still put you in very close proximity to DC. You also want to consider transportation. How are you going to plan for that? If you're living outside of DC, or even if you're living in DC, how are you going to get to where you need to get to? Are you going to take your car and then you need to add in parking time, or you can take the metro, which you also need to add in some time because sometimes things happen on the metro and the metros are not on time. So keep that in mind. And then the biggest thing is explore before you commit, right? Especially if you're purchasing a home, you want to know that you love the area. You really want to feel good about it. And I'm here to help you navigate that. So feel free to hit up my contact. We can talk about that. I do recommend, if you're new to the area, try renting first because you want to make sure you like the area that you're living in. So that's a suggestion. And if you are, thinking about doing that, you just need some help in terms of the guidance of where to land, I'm here, happy to help. There you have it. We have discussed the pros and the cons of living in DC. What do you think? I would love to hear in the comments if you think DC could be for you, or if not, why not? Why aren't you coming to DC? Tell me in the comments. We'd love to get to know you better. And look, if you're looking to move here in the next 9 days or even the next 90 days, I'm happy to be of service. Let's hop on a call to talk about your home goals, and let's see how we can make it happen for you and how you can call DC your home. Until next time, see you later.